This podcast is brought to you by Voice and Vision, bringing help, hope, and healing to individuals, families, and communities affected by mental illness, addictions, and disabilities in southeastern Pennsylvania. Financial support for this podcast is provided by a Veterans Trust Fund grant from the Pennsylvania Department of Military and Veterans Affairs.
Welcome to Untold Valor, a podcast with a unique focus on veterans, featuring stories of courage, recovery, perseverance, and strength. Listen to hear veterans share their perspectives on what it's like to battle mental health challenges, combat addictions, and overcome other adversities unique to those who have served.
It's time for another edition of the podcast, Untold Valor, where we share the stories and resources for veterans and of veterans to connect with and hopefully help them along their journey during and after their military service. And we've got Brian Natali back with us again, and he's going to be talking a little bit more into the weeds for us. We're going to get a little further into some of the resources, other programs. Brian, you were here with us once before. You work with the Veterans Affairs Office, and so we're going to kind of dive in a little further. But first of all, welcome back in. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Mark. Glad to be back today.
Absolutely. And Reverend Ben, thanks for being here as well. How are you, my friend?
I'm fantastic. And Brian, thanks for having you here. We'd appreciate your information.
Yeah, big time. I know you guys share some commonality a little bit. You guys were chatting before we got started. Reverend Ben, you and Brian, you were having some fun with some military jargon there. You guys had some similar backgrounds, it sounded like.
Yeah. So Brian, you kind of shared about your military background. What exactly did you do in the military? I mean, what is your outfit? What did you guys do? I knew you guys were some kind of support unit. What did you do?
Yeah, I was in the Marine Corps in the late 80s, early 90s, and I worked on heavy equipment. I repaired generators and forklifts and welding sets, whatever was construction equipment. So, supported lots of units.
Well, I'm sure I know for a fact that is something that is well needed, because everywhere we deploy, we have generators and we have things that need to be repaired on deployment. Have you ever been on deployment?
Well, I was not deployed to the Persian Gulf. I was in during that time. I did a year in Guantanamo Bay. At the time that we had a boat lift, the Cubans and the Haitians were trying to make it to Florida, and we were getting them out of the Caribbean Sea because they had some very unseaworthy crafts that they were trying to float families in.
Wow.
So we were a part of supporting that. That was JTF 160 back in the 90s.
That's awesome.
Thank you for your service on that mission.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got another one for you here, Brian. We want to jump in and ask you to break it into get into the weeds for us, as you put it when we were first talking before we got the podcast rolling here. So again, you do a lot with your role currently. I wanted to ask you, when you were on with the prior episode and we didn't get a chance to get to it all, what's the biggest benefit that you guys get a request on, or that you have questions on, or even offer?
We get questions about a lot of benefits. And when you get away from the federal benefits and all that stuff through the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, the number one thing that we get asked about is the real estate tax exemption. That's a fantastic program. As of today, we have over 17,000 properties in the Commonwealth that are exempt from paying 100% of their property taxes. It's an interesting program. It's a shared responsibility between the County Assessment Office and the State Veterans Commission. So we work together. We adjudicate the claims. That requires that the property be titled, deeded in the veteran and their spouse's name only. So if you're wanting to put your property in a trust and avoid some risk with nursing, home care, long-term care later into life, that could create a little bit of a problem for eligibility for the tax exemption program. There's 4 key eligibility parts. So the person has to be honorably discharged or released under honorable circumstances. They had to serve during a time of war. So from August 2nd, 1990, the start of Operation Desert Shield, until December 31st, 2022, we were in a period of war. And that period of war is all vetted in federal regulations, 38 CFR. They list the periods of war. But our program also has a provision that's beyond the requirements of 38 CFR, and it allows for armed conflict. So period of war, 38 CFR, that whole piece. If you were in the military, like I said a little bit ago, myself, I didn't go to Desert Shield or Desert Storm, but I was in the military at that time. I have wartime service. So whatever your capacity was during that period of war, and then state regulation adds that piece of armed conflict, and that requires an individual deployment. So a couple examples that Reverend Ben would certainly recognize: Grenada, right? If you were with the Marines in the early 80s that went to Grenada and you got the Expeditionary Medal to quantify that service, you would be eligible, even though 1982 was a period of peace. From 1975 to 1990, we're in a period of peace. So that would fill that need there. If it was not, well, Panama happened prior to Desert Storm. So another example would be if you were deployed to Panama for that operation in 1990, the early 1990, end of 1989.
Brian, what about the early Beirut conflict? That time period, that's not included?
Yep, absolutely. But
that was in the 80s.
Right. So the catch with that is that you had to be there, and how we measure that is the Expeditionary Medal that you would have been awarded for that deployment.
Okay.
So then there's another couple pieces to the eligibility, and it requires a VA rating. And that rating then has to be 100 total or 100% permanent. And we get a lot of questions about the or statement. If you're in tune to VA benefits, the VA will say total and permanent. So this is another niche of how state legislation is written. And I'm reading right out of Title 51, PA Consolidated Statutes, Chapter 89, Section 8902, subparagraph 2, says, as rated by the United States Veterans Administration or its successor, to be total or 100% permanent disability. So because there's an or, we have to have two paths. And the total is been determined. We had a legal opinion published years ago. So total would be individual unemployability, somebody that's rated less than 100%, but is being paid at the 100% rate because of their disabilities. They're not able to maintain gainful employment. And then the 100% permanent is what we call the rating schedule. And that's where the sum of all your disabilities equals 100%. You're rated at that and you get paid at that. And then there's a financial part. And this is where the State Veterans Commission comes in. There's a presumptive, a rebuttable presumptive of need that is part of Section 8904. And that gets adjusted every 2 years by statute, and it goes against the Consumer Price Index. It's been increased every 2 years on January 1st with a starting point of $75,000, and that began January 1st, 2009. The last adjustment to that was made January 1st of this year, 2023. And just like everybody's Social Security, inflation is off the charts. So we had like 8.2% increase. What was the presumptive? The presumptive number now is $108,046. And that's the veteran's income. So how can somebody apply for that? Go to their county director of Veterans Affairs office, and they will help with an application, and then we'll work together to get it all adjudicated and issue certificates of eligibility.
Yes. That is a great need in the community, especially I know in the city of Philadelphia. So these other monetary programs that you mentioned and services, can you tell us more about those programs?
Oh, absolutely. So those are probably our number two block of programs. We have two programs that are very similar. One is called Veterans Temporary Assistance, and it gives us a chance to help a veteran in their time of need when it just seems like everything's against them. They can't control it. It's a program that lets us grant up to $1,600 for a 1-year period. So you come to us with a need, and it has to be beyond your control. So it has to be an increase to your expenses associated with the needs of daily living, or an event that happened that was beyond your control, that is beyond your reach. So I'll give you a couple examples. We've had a lot of storms lately and some flooding. So say that you live in a low spot, you had some flooding, your basement flooded out, it took out your furnace, your hot water heater, your insurance didn't cover that stuff, and you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you don't have the money to repair the furnace. Now, whether it's June 1st or January 1st, you have to have a working furnace, right? I mean, that's one of the absolute necessities of living. So if that furnace comes back and the repair is $5,000, I can help with up to $1,600 of that. And then maybe through our network that we started to talk about on the last episode, we could get a little more granular through there and find some other organizations that could help piece together the rest of the need. Another example might be that tree fell on the roof. You need to get your roof repaired. Say that the roof repair isn't $1,600. Say that it's $1,000 to repair it, and that's what your need is. So we would pay the $1,000. You have a ability to get one claim per year, and that year starts on the date you got awarded that claim. So if it was today, it would be April 18th next year that there would be eligibility again. And whether it's the full amount or some variant of that amount, that's a claim for the year, and then you would go back through. Another program that has the same 1 year and same time frame is a program that we call MFRAP, and it stands for Military Family Relief and Assistance Program. And it's really geared at Guard and Reserve, or even those already on active duty. If you're on active duty for 30 days or more, and you have an event that is, again, beyond your control, and maybe the spouse is at home, you're on deployment, and something happens. It's another way to apply the same amount, but there's a little bit of a niche in that program where it allows us to ask for up to $3,600 through a grant committee. So the program manager can do the $1,600. But if there's a special need and there's a compelling argument that maybe we can do a little bit better to help this person, there's a way to plus that up by $2,000. Unfortunately, it does not have a provision for those that had served previously and gotten out beyond 3 or 4 years, depending on a couple variants in the statutes. So somebody like me that's been out of the military for over 10 years, I'm not going to qualify for this program. I've timed out on that eligibility. But if there's exigent or circumstances beyond the control of the applicant related to 30 days on active duty, some deployment, then we might be able to help. What's really interesting about this program and unique about it is that it gives us a way to get a family back together if there was some injury. We still have lots of service members deployed around the world. There's lots of service members that are getting injured. Reverend Ben, you were a doc attached to the Marine Corps, as we discussed earlier. You certainly sent people home with injuries and sent them back to Bethesda for further rehabilitation.
Sure.
We can get their family back together and go and be with that service member. And
Exactly. A lot of people don't realize the stress that military service has on the family members, especially during the time of an injury or something like that goes wrong. But the family unit in the military goes through a lot of stress So there are mental health issues not only with the service member, but also with family members. Are there resources to also help the family members as well?
So the family members, the spouse is able to apply for both of those programs that I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit easier with the MFRAP program. The title itself lends towards that family unit, that nuclear family, and helping them out. If you get into the Veterans Temporary Assistance, the VTA program, it's a little bit more restricted, but the spouse is named specifically in there as being eligible. So,
gotcha. And Brian, for those various different programs you just listed here over the last 15 minutes or so, again, let's kind of reiterate back how to apply for them, the best way, or how to start that ball rolling.
So the best way to apply for any program is to work with an accredited veteran service officer. I can't stress accredited enough. We have training requirements every year we need to go through, and 38 Code of Federal Regulations, the federal VA's regulations, say right in there that we cannot charge you for our services. We get some support from the federal VA. We don't report to them. We have to be accredited through their process, but specifically says we cannot charge for our services. So,
okay. And then before we wrap up again on this podcast, again, thank you so much for being here. You mentioned some great programs and services there. Any other agencies that you'd like to bring up some resources for veterans that are checking this out to think about or that may not be aware of?
Absolutely. There's lots of things that are out there in every cross-section of veteran services. In state government, there are veterans license plates. If you get a severely disabled veterans license plate, it costs you $11 for the admin fees to get it issued. After that, it's free. Hunting and fishing licenses. If you're a 100% disabled veteran, if you go to your county treasurer's office, you can get free hunting or fishing licenses.
Nice.
If you're a government employee, a state employee, there's veterans preference for hiring and the service buyback towards your retirement. Some of the counties have assistance programs similar to the two that I just discussed. There are nonprofits out there that are focused maybe at certain eras of service or certain branches of service, or maybe they're interested in certain disabilities, maybe mental health or homelessness, and how can they provide a need for that niche. Man, go see an accredited service officer. Go talk to somebody that is not going to charge you. There are lots of those resources out there.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And ask the question. Chances are there's something out there that you didn't know about that we can help you get.
Yeah, there's that's a great wealth of information again on the podcast. And so, so many resources out there. Brian, thanks for coming back on again and sharing more details. And, just, I guess we can't stress that enough, right? That's been the importance of the podcast, is to not only share stories of different veterans, but then also to share these resources so that folks know that there's things out there for them.
Absolutely.
Reverend Ben, anything else I might have missed before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, I would like to say thank you so much, Brian, for that information that you offered, because there are so many veterans in need of these programs. Just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and explain with us these different ins and outs of these, the weeds of these programs. And I hope in the future we can dig even deeper. Thank you very much.
I appreciate the time, and thank you, both you and Mark, for helping me get our message out.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for time on the podcast. As always, we appreciate it. We hope you've enjoyed the various different episodes that we've had. Certainly a great thing about a podcast is if you missed some, you could go back and check those out, play those at your disposal. And if you've found some really good information in this episode, Brian shared a lot. Just back it up, listen to it again, jot down whatever you need to jot down, and then go take advantage and see what you can find out with some of these resources and how they may help you. And thank you so much for your time here on Untold Valor. You've been listening to Untold Valor by Voice and Vision. We hope you found the information and resources discussed today helpful. As always, thank you for listening and for your support. Remember to stay connected with us through our various social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Don't forget to visit the website, voiceandvisioninc.org. That's voiceandvisioninc.org, where you can sign up for our blog and find free resources and information on upcoming events, webinars, workshops, and get support. You can also access our free help and hope guide for individuals and families struggling with substance use and addiction. If someone you know is struggling, please reach out for help because you and your life matter. Remember, the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available to you at any time by dialing 988. We are all ambassadors of hope and recovery, and if you want to share your story, please contact us. Compeer Corps is also looking for veteran mentor volunteers and veteran participants. To find out more information about Compeer Corps, please call 610-541-0790. That's 610-541-0790. You can find all the links and contact information for the resources mentioned on today's episode by checking the description and the show notes section of your app. Thank you again for tuning in and for your support. Until next time, this has been Untold Valor.